The galaxy had always been a vast and dangerous place, but lately, the tension seemed heavier than ever. Across the stars, human colonies had grown in power and influence, their fleets carving paths of trade and diplomacy through systems that were once controlled entirely by the Galactic Empire. The humans had never sought war, but their success, their independence, and their unbroken spirit had begun to stir unease at the very heart of the Empire. General Aria Vale stood alone on the observation deck of her flagship, staring out at the swirl of stars beyond the thick glass. The room was quiet, save for the low hum of the ship's engines and the occasional chirp of distant communication signals. The general's sharp eyes traced the lines of distant planets and the scattered light of trade convoys, and yet her mind was elsewhere. She knew something was coming, something dark, something deliberate. Her instincts, honed through decades of military service, told her that the Emperor himself had taken notice of her actions. Vale had always been different from other generals. She had never sought glory in the heat of battle or power over her troops. She led with strategy and foresight, valuing human life and calculated risk over reckless heroics. Her successes had made her a legend among humans. Countless battles avoided through diplomacy and careful planning. Entire colonies saved from destruction, because she had anticipated the enemy's next move. But those victories had not gone unnoticed by her enemies. On the Emperor's throne world, high above the burning clouds of a massive gas giant, whispers of her deeds had reached the ear of the most dangerous man in the galaxy. The Emperor was a figure of immense authority and cunning, ruling through fear and the threat of overwhelming force. To him, Vale's influence was not merely a threat, it was a challenge. The thought that a human commander could outthink his agents, his fleets, and his strategies was intolerable. And so he began planning a strike that was as silent as it was deadly. Vale had been aware of subtle signs for weeks. A missing transport here, a sabotaged communications relay there. Little incidents that seemed unrelated, but carried the unmistakable pattern of deliberate infiltration. She did not announce her suspicions to the crew. Panic, she knew, would serve the enemy more than it would protect her people. Instead, she observed, planned, and prepared. Every patrol route was shifted. Every system sensor calibrated to detect anomalies in ways her enemies would not anticipate. Late one night, as the twin moons of the colony cast silver light across the barren surface, Vale received a coded transmission. It was encrypted in a style used only by elite intelligence agents of the Empire, and it carried a message that needed no translation. She was marked. Her pulse did not quicken. She did not shout orders or summon her captains to a meeting. Instead, she simply recorded the transmission, stored it in the archives, and returned to the observation deck. She let the silence of the stars fill her thoughts. It was not fear that filled her mind, but clarity. She had faced threats before, both on the battlefield and in the shadowy world of espionage. The humans had survived because of their discipline, their loyalty, and their willingness to confront danger without hesitation. She would not allow the Empire to underestimate them, nor would she allow them to strike first. Patience, she knew, was often the deadliest weapon. The next morning, Vale walked among her troops. Soldiers who had trained under her for years recognized the calm in her steps, the quiet authority in her gaze. She spoke to no one of the danger, but her presence alone sent a message. The general was aware, prepared, and unwavering. The crew felt the tension, but they also felt reassurance. Vale's reputation had been built not on brute force, but on precision, judgment, and a steadfast refusal to bend in the face of threats. They trusted her, and that trust was as much a shield as any armor. Across the galaxy, the Emperor's elite assassins were already being briefed. Selected from the deadliest and most loyal operatives in the Empire, they had been trained since childhood for this exact purpose: to eliminate a single target with efficiency and secrecy. Their training was legendary, their successes numerous, yet even they had never faced someone like Vale. They had been given orders and expected victory, but they could not anticipate the strategy, the foresight, and the intelligence waiting for them on Epsilon 9, the remote frontier planet where Vale's command was based. Vale spent her days reviewing plans, mapping out every possible approach and imagining every scenario the assassins might employ. She had learned that those who strike in darkness often reveal themselves in the smallest ways. The pattern of disruption, the way communications faltered for moments too long, the subtle discrepancies in supply lines, all of it pointed to the enemy's methods. Vale would use that knowledge to turn the invaders' shadows into their trap. At night, when the base fell quiet, she walked along the observation balconies overlooking the jagged terrain. The moons reflected off the glass of her visor, painting the surface in ghostly silver. Here, in the silence, she could think without interruption. She thought of the humans she had sworn to protect, the families who had entrusted their lives to her decisions, and the soldiers who relied on her judgment. Every step she took in preparation was for them. Every plan, every trap, every contingency was designed to prevent the bloodshed the Empire sought to bring. Even as the assassins moved closer, disguised among traders and travelers, Vale's preparations were meticulous. She had analyzed every known tactic, predicted every possible point of entry, and created redundancies that would catch the enemy if they attempted to bypass her defenses. Her mind was a battlefield in itself, each scenario a skirmish, each calculation a shield. And yet, despite the looming threat, Vale never allowed herself to be consumed by fear. She knew fear was a weapon the Empire often used against its opponents. She also knew courage alone was not enough. Discipline, foresight, and a willingness to act decisively were the true measures of a commander. The galaxy had many who sought power through intimidation, but Vale believed in power through preparedness, through action, and through the unwavering commitment to protect those who could not protect themselves. As dawn broke over Epsilon 9, casting warm light across the colony's metal spires, Vale gathered her senior officers. Her voice was calm, measured, and without urgency, yet each word carried weight. "We have threats approaching," she said simply. "We will meet them not with panic, but with clarity. Every move they make, we will anticipate. Every step they take, we will counter. Prepare yourselves. This is the moment we have trained for, though you may not have known it." Her officers nodded, understanding both the gravity of her words and the confidence behind them. There was no hesitation, no confusion, only resolve. And in that quiet moment, the seeds of what would become a legendary defense were planted. Vale's mind was already several moves ahead of her enemies, considering not just survival, but the message her actions would send across the galaxy. Outside, the stars seemed to watch in silence. The galaxy, vast and indifferent, continued its endless spin. But for those who knew the stakes, a storm was coming. Vale would face it with precision, with strategy, and with the calm certainty of one who knew the value of every life under her protection. The Empire's assassins were moving closer, unaware that their approach had already been calculated, foreseen, and accounted for. This was not the beginning of a battle in the usual sense. There were no fleets clashing in open space, no cries of war echoing across the planet's surface. Instead, it was a quiet, invisible struggle of minds, of preparation against the unknown and of courage against the shadows. And in this quiet struggle, General Vale stood as a human force to be reckoned with, a commander ready to defend her people no matter the cost, against the deadliest threat the galaxy could send. The calm of the frontier base was deceptive. To anyone observing from afar, Epsilon 9 appeared ordinary, quiet, and unremarkable. A small colony perched on a jagged planet at the edge of human space. But those who knew its true purpose understood that every system, every corridor, and every sensor had been placed with intent. General Vale's foresight had transformed the base into more than a stronghold. It was a web of preparation designed to detect, trap, and neutralize threats before they could strike. In the early hours, the first unusual signs appeared. Drones sent out to patrol the perimeter failed to return at scheduled intervals. Minor malfunctions, a technician reported. A glitch in the sensor array, nothing to be alarmed about. Yet Vale did not dismiss it. She knew better. Small errors often concealed deliberate intrusion, and in this case the pattern was too precise to be accidental. Her instincts, honed over countless missions, told her the Empire's agents were already near. Far above the colony, cloaked in the shadow of space, the Emperor's elite assassins approached. They had left their flagship in silent orbit, slipping through the edge of human-controlled sectors undetected. Trained for decades in stealth and elimination, they carried weapons that could end lives in a blink, devices designed to bypass any security system. Yet even they did not know the full extent of Vale's preparation, the human mind that could anticipate moves they had never seen. On Epsilon 9, Vale walked the observation balcony, her eyes scanning the horizon. The twin moons cast a pale light across the base, and the jagged cliffs and metallic structures reflected it in patterns that made the terrain feel alive. She did not speak to anyone. She did not need to. Her presence alone sent a silent message to her officers. She was aware, prepared, and unwavering. Every detail mattered. Every possibility had been considered, and the enemy would soon find that the shadows they relied upon could not hide them here. Inside the base, her officers moved with quiet efficiency. They recalibrated sensors, double-checked entry points, and walked the hallways that connected the observation towers to the command center. Everyone knew something was approaching, yet none dared voice alarm. In Vale's command, fear was neither encouraged nor useful. Instead, they operated with a calm discipline, trusting her guidance implicitly. The assassins began their descent with the precision of shadows. Disguised as traders, engineers, and travelers from distant sectors, they moved quietly toward the base's perimeter. Each step was calculated, each movement intended to bypass detection. They were the finest killers in the Emperor's arsenal, and they believed nothing could stop them. Yet their first mistake was underestimating Vale herself. She had studied every known tactic, every maneuver ever employed by such operatives, and she had prepared responses that would turn their own skills against them. As the night deepened, the first signs of intrusion were subtle. Sensors briefly flickered as though confused. Communications had momentary lapses. Small supply units were slightly displaced, as if moved by invisible hands. These were signals only a trained observer could detect, and Vale noticed them immediately. She did not panic. She moved calmly through the control room, monitoring the feeds, noting the anomalies, and adjusting her strategy in real time. By midnight, the assassins were inside the outer perimeter, unaware that every step they took had been predicted. Vale had already anticipated the paths they might take, the doors they might attempt to access, and the sequences they would attempt to disable. Every corridor they entered led them further into the trap she had set. The quiet hum of the base, the ordinary blinking of the lights, and the soft sound of air circulation were all carefully orchestrated to lull intruders into a false sense of security. One assassin, the first to approach the command center, paused at a security checkpoint. He swiped a forged access card and stepped forward, confident in his skills. Immediately, a silent locking mechanism sealed the hallway behind him. The sensors activated a discreet signal, alerting Vale that the intruder was caught in the first layer of her defense. She did not smile. She simply noted the event and adjusted the next steps. Elsewhere, the second assassin attempted to disable a sensor array. Vale had anticipated this. The array had been designed with a failsafe. Tampering with it would activate a controlled lockdown of multiple sections, isolating the intruder. Moments later, the assassin realized the doors he expected to open were now sealed. His training had not prepared him for a base that anticipated every action he might take. He was trapped. In the control room, Vale monitored the entire process with a calm detachment. She did not celebrate or gloat. She simply ensured that every aspect of her strategy functioned as intended. Her decisions were precise, every action deliberate, and every observation meticulous. She understood that victory in such circumstances did not require brute force, but intelligence, patience, and the ability to manipulate the battlefield without exposing herself or her team. The assassins began to realize that the base was more than it appeared. Each attempt to advance was met with a calculated obstacle. Hallways closed off, security systems isolated them, and even their communication devices failed at crucial moments. The tension grew, but Vale remained calm, her mind working several steps ahead. She had studied their patterns, anticipated their reactions, and designed contingencies for every eventuality. Outside, the colony remained eerily quiet. From the vantage point of the moons, the lights of the base were steady and unremarkable, giving no hint of the struggle taking place within. Vale understood the importance of maintaining appearances. To the outside world, life continued as normal, even as the most lethal assassins in the galaxy were being outmaneuvered at every turn. The first encounter occurred without warning. As the first assassin moved through the sealed hallway, a concealed security unit engaged silently. By the time the intruder realized the danger, escape was impossible. Vale had instructed her team to disable him with non-lethal precision where possible, but her plan allowed for decisive action if necessary. Within moments, the intruder was neutralized, his movements frozen before he could complete his mission. The second assassin, attempting a different approach, triggered a trap designed specifically for someone of his training. Valued for his cunning and agility, he found that the base responded to his every action. Corridors shifted, doors locked, and the environment itself seemed to anticipate him. Frustration set in, and for the first time he hesitated, a fatal flaw. Vale's strategy relied not just on technology, but on psychological control, using the enemy's confidence against them. As the night progressed, the remaining assassins began to realize that the humans had prepared for every scenario. They communicated through hidden channels, trying to coordinate their movements, but Vale's countermeasures disrupted even this. Every attempt to regroup or adapt was met with a pre-planned response. It was not brute force that defeated them, but meticulous foresight, discipline, and an understanding of human nature that technology alone could not provide. Vale moved quietly among her team, checking sensors and ensuring coordination. Her presence inspired calm determination. Every officer and soldier knew what was expected of them, and they executed flawlessly. No one panicked, no one faltered. They understood that survival and victory depended on discipline, intelligence, and trust in their leader. By the first light of dawn, the base was secure. The assassins, despite their training and resources, had failed to achieve any of their objectives. Some had been neutralized quietly. Others had been trapped and rendered ineffective. Vale did not celebrate. She knew this was only the beginning of the conflict, only the first step in a struggle that would test every skill, every decision, and every ounce of courage her team possessed. She walked the corridors, observing the aftermath. Equipment had been disturbed, minor systems damaged, but no life had been lost among her people. The precision of her planning had ensured that the intruders were contained without unnecessary harm. She paused in the command center, looking out at the rising moons reflecting on the night's events. The Empire's assassins had underestimated her, underestimated humans, and underestimated the power of careful preparation. Yet Vale also knew that this was only a temporary victory. The Emperor would not be deterred by failure. He would learn, adapt, and strike again. Her duty was to remain vigilant, to anticipate every move, and to protect her people at any cost. The quiet night, the empty halls, and the calm exterior of the base belied the intensity of the struggle that had just occurred. Only those who had been there understood the tension, the danger, and the skill involved in turning the hunters into the hunted. As the first workers arrived to begin their morning routines, Vale met with her officers. She did not praise them lavishly. Such words were unnecessary. She simply reminded them of their duty, their skill, and their responsibility. Tonight we survived because we were prepared. Tomorrow we must remain vigilant, for the Empire will not stop. We act not with anger, but with clarity and purpose. That is how we protect those who cannot protect themselves. Her words resonated with the team. They had witnessed the precision, the foresight, and the calm authority that had carried them through the night. They had seen the assassins, trained and lethal, neutralized through intelligence and planning. The night settled over Epsilon 9 like a heavy blanket, thick and dark. The twin moons cast pale silver light across the jagged cliffs, reflecting off the colony's metallic spires and giving the base a cold, almost ghostly appearance. Inside, General Arya Vale moved with quiet purpose, her footsteps measured, her mind focused. The assassins sent by the Emperor were no longer just a rumor. They were inside her territory, testing her defenses, and every move they made had been anticipated. Vale did not need to see them to know where they were. The subtle disturbances in the security network, the momentary flickers in communication lines, and the minor deviations in supply logs, all of it painted a picture in her mind, a map of the intruders' approach. Every hallway they had traversed, every door they had tried to breach, had been designed to lead them toward the trap she had carefully prepared. The first assassin, a man trained to kill without hesitation, had already been contained in a sealed corridor. His movements were now irrelevant. The base had adapted around him, cutting off his escape routes and isolating him from his team. Vale did not gloat. She knew that patience, not pride, was the true weapon of a leader. The second assassin, realizing that the first had disappeared from his view, attempted to regroup with his comrades. But Vale had anticipated this. The corridors were now shifting, controlled by her team from the central command room. Doors that once seemed accessible now led to sealed chambers. Sensors guided her team silently to intercept, and within moments the second intruder found himself blocked at every turn. Frustration crept across his features, but Vale's plan allowed no room for hesitation. As the night deepened, the remaining assassins became increasingly aware that something was very wrong. Their sophisticated tracking systems designed to detect human movements and predict behavior were failing. The base was responding in ways they could not understand. Every corridor seemed to twist. Every door led to unexpected places, and every attempt to communicate with one another was met with silence. Inside the command center, Vale observed it all. Her hands moved over the control panels, adjusting sensors, redirecting automated defenses, and monitoring the movement of every intruder. She was calm, almost serene, but her mind worked tirelessly. She anticipated their next moves even before they themselves realized them. She had studied countless scenarios, prepared for every tactic, and designed traps that exploited both the assassins' skills and their weaknesses. The first real confrontation occurred in a quiet section of the base, where the assassins attempted to breach a supply chamber. Vale had predicted this. As the door slid open, a silent mechanism engaged, sealing the room instantly. The intruders found themselves surrounded by reinforced barriers, leaving them no option for retreat. They were skilled, but skill alone could not overcome preparation. Vale's team moved in with quiet precision, ensuring that the intruders were neutralized without unnecessary risk to themselves. Elsewhere, another assassin attempted to bypass a security sensor. Vale had installed a countermeasure specifically for this scenario. The sensor triggered a silent lockdown in multiple adjacent corridors, isolating the intruder from the rest of his team. Panic began to set in, a rare emotion for soldiers trained to control every instinct. In the shadows, Vale's plan was working perfectly. The hunters had become the hunted. Despite the tension, Vale's demeanor remained unchanged. She moved among her team silently, issuing orders through a secure network monitoring every corridor and chamber. Her soldiers followed her instructions without question, each action precise and deliberate. They trusted her completely, knowing that her calm and intelligence were their best defense. The assassins, realizing their strategy had failed, attempted to improvise. They split into smaller groups, hoping to create confusion and find a way to reach Vale herself. But every route they took had been anticipated. Sensors tracked them, doors redirected them, and surveillance feeds allowed Vale to observe their every move. She did not need to act immediately. She only needed to guide them toward the final stage of her plan. Hours passed like this, a tense dance between predator and prey. Though in this case, the prey had the advantage. Vale's mind remained several steps ahead, adjusting her strategy in real time. She had anticipated not just the intruders' actions, but their reactions to obstacles, their frustrations, and their attempts to regain control. Every psychological edge was leveraged, every predictable mistake exploited. Finally, the assassins reached the last section of the base before the command center. They had expected resistance, but not this level of preparation. The hallway stretched before them, seemingly normal, but Vale had transformed it into a trap. As they stepped forward, the floor beneath them shifted slightly, guiding them into containment chambers reinforced with the latest security technology. The assassins realized too late that their path had been carefully orchestrated from the moment they arrived. Vale's team moved silently to secure the chambers. She watched on the monitors as the intruders struggled against the barriers. Their skills, their weapons, their training, all were useless against the human mind that had foreseen their every move. Vale did not celebrate. She simply observed, ensuring that no mistakes were made in containing them. Her calm authority was the final element in a plan that had unfolded exactly as intended. As the first hints of dawn appeared over the horizon, the situation was clear. The assassins had been neutralized or contained, unable to accomplish their mission. Vale's preparation, foresight, and strategic genius had turned the Empire's deadliest operatives into prisoners of circumstance. The quiet corridors of the base, once ordinary, had become a labyrinth from which escape was impossible. Vale walked through the command center, her steps deliberate and measured. She did not gloat, did not speak words of victory. Instead, she focused on the aftermath, checking systems, ensuring that her team was safe and preparing for the inevitable consequences. The Emperor would not let this failure pass without retaliation. She knew this, and she knew that vigilance would be required every day, every hour. Her officers reported in, detailing the neutralization of each intruder. Vale listened carefully, absorbing every detail, and then issued instructions for securing the containment chambers. The assassins had been captured or eliminated with minimal risk to her team, but there was no time for complacency. Every move, every decision, would have to be repeated, refined, and reinforced until the threat was truly gone. Outside the command center, the first light of dawn illuminated the base. The colony appeared peaceful once more, but beneath the surface the echoes of the night's events lingered. The assassins had come with the intent to kill, to strike fear, and to eliminate a human leader who had defied the Empire. Instead, they had been outmatched, not by brute force but by intelligence, preparation, and the calm, unwavering presence of a commander who understood the value of patience and foresight. Vale moved to the observation balcony, looking out at the landscape. The jagged cliffs and metallic spires caught the morning light, casting long shadows that reminded her of the night's struggle. She thought of her team, of the soldiers who had followed her instructions without hesitation, and of the people she had sworn to protect. Their trust had been justified. Her planning had ensured their safety, yet Vale also knew that this was only one battle in a much larger conflict. The Emperor would learn from failure, adapt his tactics, and strike again. Her duty was not simply to survive, but to anticipate, to prepare, and to protect at every turn. The quiet night, the empty halls, and the calm exterior of the base belied the intensity of the struggle that had just occurred. Only those who had been present truly understood the skill, patience, and courage that had been required to outmaneuver the deadliest assassins in the galaxy. As the colony began its daily routines, Vale met with her officers. She did not praise them excessively. They did not need it. Instead, she reminded them of their responsibility: vigilance, discipline, and readiness for whatever the Empire might send next. Her words were simple, direct, and filled with the quiet authority that had guided them through the night. We have survived today because we prepared, because we stayed calm, and because we trusted each other. Tomorrow we continue. We act not with fear but with clarity and purpose. Her officers nodded, understanding both the gravity and the reassurance in her words. They had witnessed the precision of her leadership, the calm authority that had guided them through a night of uncertainty and danger. They had seen the Empire's assassins neutralized not by weapons alone, but by foresight, intelligence, and careful planning. And they knew without a doubt that under Vale's command, humans could survive even the deadliest threats. The first rays of sunlight reflected off the colony's surfaces, casting long shadows that stretched across the landscape. To an outsider, it was a quiet frontier colony beginning another day. But within its walls, a lesson had been written in silence, strategy, and determination. Under Vale's leadership, no threat, no matter how skilled, trained, or deadly, could succeed without facing the full force of human intelligence and courage. The message arrived faster than the Emperor expected. Within hours of the failed mission, the news reached the Imperial throne world, carried by encrypted channels meant to be untraceable and secure. Yet somehow the truth found its way to him. The Emperor, seated in his towering chamber of glass and metal, read the report himself. His eyes, cold and calculating, flicked across the details. Every assassin had been neutralized or captured, their movements anticipated and countered at every turn. The report was precise, leaving no room for doubt. A deep silence filled the throne room. The Emperor's advisors, military leaders, and intelligence officers waited nervously. No one dared speak until he chose to break the quiet. Finally he rose, his robes flowing like liquid shadow, and his voice when he spoke was calm but edged with unmistakable anger. "They underestimated us," he said almost to himself. They underestimated human ingenuity. They believed that trained killers could reach their prey without consequence. They were wrong. The Emperor's mind moved quickly, already calculating the next steps. He could not afford another failure. His reputation, his power, and the authority of the Empire depended on maintaining fear across the galaxy. To lose to a single human commander was more than an embarrassment. It was a threat to his control. He called his generals forward, demanding immediate strategies to counter Vale's growing influence. "She is clever," he said. "Too clever. She must be reminded why the Empire rules the stars, and this time she will not escape our grasp." Meanwhile, Far from the throne world, Vale walked through the quiet corridors of Epsilon 9. The base was calm now, but the energy of the night's events lingered in the air. Her soldiers moved with practiced efficiency, repairing minor damages, checking sensors, and ensuring that every system functioned perfectly. Vale observed it all with her usual calm demeanor. There was no celebration, no boastful words. She had accomplished her objective, but she knew this was only a chapter in a much larger struggle. Vale understood the nature of the enemy she faced. The Emperor was relentless, calculating, and unyielding. He would not forget the failure of his assassins, nor would he tolerate a human commander who had outmaneuvered his forces. Yet she also knew that fear could not guide her decisions. Her strength came not from weapons alone, but from preparation, strategy, and the trust her team placed in her leadership. Every choice had been deliberate, every action calculated, and every risk measured. It was in this calm that Vale made her next move. She summoned her officers to the central command room, her voice steady and clear. "The Empire knows of our success," she said. "They will not act openly yet, but they are watching. Our next step is to send a message, a clear, unmistakable message that they cannot ignore." Her team listened intently, understanding the weight of her words. They had followed her through the night, trusted her guidance, and witnessed the precision with which she had neutralized the assassins. Now they would witness her courage in another form. The message was simple in appearance but powerful in meaning. Vale prepared a secure container, marked with human military insignia, containing the heads of the assassins who had attempted to take her life. Each had been neutralized cleanly and carefully, a demonstration of skill rather than cruelty. The act was symbolic, a warning, a statement, and a declaration of human resolve. It was a message the Emperor could not misinterpret. The humans would not be intimidated, and they were fully capable of defending themselves against even his deadliest agents. Once the container was prepared, Vale's team coordinated its delivery to the edge of Imperial space. The route was carefully chosen to avoid unnecessary conflict, yet to ensure the Emperor would receive it. Every detail was considered: timing, security, and presentation. Vale did not act out of vengeance, but out of necessity. She understood that symbols mattered in this galaxy, and that a clear, measured demonstration of strength could deter further attacks while preserving the integrity of her forces. As the transmission of the container reached the Emperor's fleet, the reaction was immediate. His intelligence officers intercepted the message, and the sight of the heads, a visual confirmation of his agent's defeat, spread through the command structure like wildfire. Shock, disbelief, and anger rippled among the highest ranks. No one had expected such a decisive outcome, nor the clarity of Vale's statement. It was audacious, even dangerous, but undeniable in its impact. The Emperor's reaction was swift and controlled. He did not shout, did not display rash emotion, but his mind worked with lethal efficiency. He knew that responding with brute force immediately would be unwise. Vale's defenses were formidable, her team disciplined, and the human colonies unpredictable. Instead, he chose to study the situation, to analyze the methods and tactics that had led to this outcome, and to consider how best to assert control without risking another failure. Across Epsilon 9, Vale and her officers observed the subtle indicators of Imperial reaction. Reports suggested heightened patrols, fleet movements near human-controlled sectors, and minor disruptions in communications across frontier colonies. The Emperor had not retaliated openly yet, but his presence was felt. Vale did not hesitate. She used this period to strengthen her base further, enhance defenses, and prepare contingencies for every possible form of retaliation. Patience, she knew, was as crucial as courage. The humans of the base responded with unwavering dedication. Soldiers repaired systems, recalibrated sensors, and drilled procedures that would ensure readiness for any emergency. Vale moved among them quietly, offering guidance and reassurance. Her presence alone was enough to steady nerves, instill confidence, and maintain focus. Every officer understood that survival depended not just on technology, but on discipline, trust, and the ability to act decisively under pressure. In the wider galaxy, stories of the incident began to circulate. Human colonies spoke of the audacity and skill with which Vale had neutralized the Emperor's assassins. Even those distant from the conflict were struck by the precision and courage involved. While the Empire worked to contain the narrative, whispers spread, shaping perceptions and reinforcing the reputation of General Vale. She was not merely a commander, She was a symbol of human resilience and strategic brilliance. Back on the throne world, the Emperor's advisors debated the situation endlessly. Some argued for immediate military retaliation, while others cautioned against rushing into conflict. The Emperor listened carefully, weighing every suggestion, yet he remained silent for long periods, his expression unreadable. Finally, he spoke, his voice deliberate. Force alone will not achieve what intelligence and foresight have thwarted. We must adapt, plan, and act with precision. She will not escape us again, but we will not strike blindly. Patience is necessary, as is control. Vale, meanwhile, did not act out of arrogance or triumph. She understood the balance of power, the nature of threats, and the importance of perception. Her decision to send the message was calculated, designed to warn the Emperor without provoking reckless retaliation. It was a demonstration of resolve, intelligence, and strategic thinking that transcended brute force. Over the following days, Epsilon 9 remained tense but orderly. Patrols were increased, sensor networks monitored activity across the planet, and every soldier was prepared for the possibility of renewed assault. Vale spent her time analyzing intelligence reports, studying potential Imperial responses, and refining her strategies. Her focus was clear: protect her people, maintain readiness, and anticipate the next move. Every detail mattered, and no risk was taken lightly. Despite the tension, Vale took moments to reflect. She considered the weight of leadership, the responsibility of protecting human lives, and the burden of making decisions that could shape the course of a galaxy. The stakes were immense, but she remained grounded in her principles: careful planning, strategic foresight, and unwavering commitment to her people. Courage was necessary, but discipline and intelligence were what would ensure survival. The message had achieved its purpose. The Emperor knew that Vale was not a target that could be eliminated easily, and that the humans of Epsilon 9 were capable of outmaneuvering his finest agents. The symbolism of the heads sent in the container was clear. Human resolve was strong, their defenses formidable, and their leader brilliant. Yet Vale also understood that the Emperor's anger and pride meant the threat was far from over. This victory was temporary, a pause in the larger conflict that would continue until the Empire either respected human autonomy or attempted another strike. As the colony settled into a tense routine, Vale addressed her officers. Her words were calm, steady, and filled with quiet authority. The Emperor has seen our strength. He understands that we cannot be defeated easily, but our duty is not to provoke nor to underestimate him. Our duty is to prepare, to protect, and to act with clarity at every moment. We have won a battle, but the war is ongoing. Stay vigilant, trust your training, and trust each other. Her team absorbed the message, understanding both its caution and its inspiration. They had witnessed their commander outthink the Empire's deadliest assassins, and they knew that under her leadership, they could face even the most formidable threats. Confidence, discipline, and trust in leadership were the pillars that would carry them through whatever came next. Outside, the news of what had happened on Epsilon 9 traveled faster than any fleet of ships. At first, it was a whisper among frontier colonies. A small, obscure human base had survived an assault by assassins sent from the heart of the Empire. Then the story spread to trade hubs, military outposts, and eventually, to the wider human colonies. By the time it reached the central sectors, the tale had grown into something legendary. Every person who heard it added detail, emphasized bravery, and marveled at the intelligence and skill involved. General Vale became more than a commander. She became a symbol. To the humans, she was a protector whose careful planning had saved countless lives. Her calm authority, her ability to foresee danger, and her unwavering courage inspired both admiration and loyalty. Soldiers across human space began to whisper her name before battles, telling stories of her strategy, her foresight, and the way she had turned the Empire's deadliest assassins into trapped, defeated shadows. Even among civilians, the legend grew. Families who had once feared the vastness of space and the threat of the Empire now spoke of Vale with pride. Children in remote colonies drew sketches of her starships and imagined themselves serving under her command. Traders recounted the story in market squares and cantinas, emphasizing the calm determination with which Vale had faced an almost certain threat. Every telling reinforced a simple truth: humans, guided by intelligence and courage, could withstand the might of the Empire. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, the Emperor's reaction was no less intense. Though he had not yet acted openly, the reports of Vale's victory spread through the corridors of his throne world. His generals, once confident in the reach and power of the Empire, began to question their leader's judgment. How could a human commander anticipate, outmaneuver, and neutralize assassins trained since childhood, using tactics that had been perfected over decades? It was a blemish on the Empire's record, one that could not be ignored. The Emperor, however, remained calm outwardly. He did not shout or show emotion. He analyzed, recalculated, and planned. Vale's actions had revealed a new reality. Brute force alone would not suffice against humans who were disciplined, intelligent, and united. Yet he was not deterred. He believed that no victory was permanent, and no human could withstand the full power of the Empire indefinitely. His mind turned constantly, devising methods to counter Vale's strategy, to regain control, and to remind the galaxy of his authority. Back on Epsilon 9, Vale moved through the colony with quiet purpose. The base had become more than a stronghold. It was a center of learning, strategy, and inspiration. Her officers worked tirelessly, refining protocols, improving defenses, and ensuring that every soldier understood both the mission and the importance of discipline. Vale spoke little of her own legend. She preferred her team to focus on preparation, training, and the task at hand. Her calm, deliberate manner inspired confidence, and her soldiers responded with loyalty and dedication. The humans of the frontier began to take notice of the strategic lessons embedded in Vale's actions. Observers, analysts, and young officers studied her methods, attempting to understand how a single commander could anticipate the moves of the most lethal assassins in the galaxy. They noted her patience, her reliance on intelligence over brute strength, and her ability to turn potential weaknesses into strengths. Her approach became a model, a standard for human military strategy in an increasingly dangerous galaxy. Even the Empire's allies, those who had remained neutral in human conflicts, began to whisper of Vale. Reports circulated through their networks, describing the audacity, precision, and skill with which she had neutralized the assassins. Some were impressed. Others feared the implications. If humans could outthink and outmaneuver elite operatives of the Empire, what might they accomplish in the next frontier wars? The whispers became rumors, the rumors became stories, and the stories spread like wildfire. Despite the growing legend, Vale herself remained focused on the practical. She did not seek fame or recognition. She understood the danger of complacency, the risk of underestimating an enemy who was intelligent, relentless, and patient. Every day she walked the corridors of Epsilon 9, checking systems, reviewing intelligence, and preparing her team for whatever the Emperor might attempt next. Her calm authority, combined with meticulous preparation, kept the base secure and her soldiers confident. The story of the assassins' defeat also spread among the soldiers themselves, reinforcing morale and discipline. Young recruits who had trained under Vale's supervision were inspired by the tale of precision, patience, and courage. They understood that true victory was not measured by the number of enemies defeated, but by the ability to protect one's people, anticipate threats, and act decisively. In this way, Vale's actions became both a practical guide and a source of inspiration for the next generation of human commanders. The impact of Vale's success extended beyond military circles. Colonists, traders, and civilians began to understand that humans could survive, adapt, and even thrive in a galaxy dominated by the Empire. Her legend offered hope, a reminder that careful planning, courage, and intelligence could counter overwhelming odds. Messages, stories, and recordings of her strategy circulated throughout human space, reinforcing the perception that humans were no longer mere subjects of circumstance. They were active participants in shaping their own destiny. The Empire, while outwardly silent, was far from inactive. The Emperor intensified monitoring of human sectors, dispatched reconnaissance fleets, and ordered intelligence agents to study Vale's methods in detail. Every move she had made, every strategy she had employed was analyzed and catalogued. The Emperor sought to understand not only her tactics but the qualities that allowed a human commander to anticipate his most lethal operatives. Yet despite their analysis, the humans remained unpredictable, disciplined, and adaptive. Vale's ingenuity could not be fully anticipated. Within Epsilon 9, Vale's focus remained clear. She trained her team, ensured readiness, and maintained the security of the base. She understood that her growing legend, while inspiring, also carried risk. The Empire would act again, seeking to reassert control and erase the embarrassment of their failed assassins. Every precaution was taken. Patrols were increased, sensor arrays were enhanced, and contingency plans were developed for every conceivable scenario. Her officers, though inspired by her leadership, also understood the burden she bore. Vale carried the responsibility for every life on the base, for every mission, and for the safety of the frontier colonies she influenced. Yet she bore it with calm determination. Her authority was neither loud nor boastful. It was quiet, measured, and deliberate. Soldiers trusted her because she acted consistently, made thoughtful decisions, and demonstrated both courage and intelligence under pressure. The spread of her legend had another effect. It created a psychological advantage. Across the galaxy, humans and non-humans alike began to regard Vale with a mix of respect and fear. Stories of her strategy, patience, and precision made even distant observers cautious. The assassin's defeat was not just a tactical victory. It was a demonstration of human resilience, intelligence, and the capacity to face overwhelming threats without succumbing to fear. Vale herself did not dwell on the legend. She focused on the tangible, the training of her team, the security of Epsilon 9, and the preparation for potential retaliation. She knew that while stories inspired morale, they could also provoke envy, anger, and aggression from the Empire. Her calm, practical approach ensured that the base remained strong, her soldiers confident, and her strategies adaptive. The colony of Epsilon 9 became a hub of learning, strategy, and preparation. Soldiers shared experiences, refined tactics, and trained under Vale's guidance. Observers from nearby colonies came to study her methods, learning how patience, intelligence, and careful planning could overcome even the most skilled enemies. Vale's influence grew, not through arrogance but through the quiet demonstration of capability and foresight. At the same time, the Empire's reaction remained measured. While they could not act openly without risk, they studied Vale relentlessly. Her strategies, her preparation, and her calm authority became case studies in both human resilience and tactical innovation. They recognized that defeating her would require more than brute force. It would require patience, adaptation, and careful planning of their own. For Vale, the lesson was simple. The galaxy would not remain quiet, and threats would continue. Her responsibility was to prepare, protect, and anticipate. Stories and legends inspired others, but the reality of survival depended on discipline, intelligence, and courage. Every decision, every action, every preparation was made with that understanding. By the end of the week, the story of the assassin's defeat had reached nearly every corner of human-controlled space. Colonies celebrated quietly, soldiers trained more diligently, and civilians whispered tales of the general who had outsmarted the Empire's deadliest killers. Vale observed the ripple effect with quiet satisfaction, not pride, understanding that her actions had strengthened human resolve, inspired confidence, and shaped the perception of human capability across the stars. Yet she never let herself relax. The Empire's shadow was long, patient, and unyielding. Vale knew that another challenge would come per high. The galaxy had grown tense. Stories of General Vale's brilliance, her strategy, and the audacity of neutralizing the Emperor's assassins had spread to every human colony, every trading post, and even into the shadowed corridors of Imperial intelligence. The Empire, though vast and powerful, was no longer unchallenged. Vale's name had become a symbol of human ingenuity, discipline, and courage, an inspiration that had ignited hope across the frontier and fear within the heart of the Empire itself. Vale moved quietly through the corridors of Epsilon 9, reviewing systems and checking defenses. Her calm demeanor concealed the depth of her preparation. She understood that the Empire would not allow this defiance to stand indefinitely. Each patrol, sensor, and strategic decision was part of a larger plan, designed not just to defend the colony, but to protect the ideals that humans had fought for across the stars. Her soldiers moved with confidence, inspired not only by their commander's skill, but by the knowledge that they were part of something greater than themselves. Reports of Imperial fleet movements began to arrive. Reconnaissance satellites detected ships deploying near human-controlled sectors. Intelligence suggested that the Emperor intended to respond, not with stealth assassins this time, but with the might of his armada. Vale studied every detail. Fleet positions, logistics, sensor arrays, and possible approaches were mapped and analyzed. She knew that direct confrontation was inevitable, yet she also understood that intelligence and strategy could neutralize even overwhelming force. Vale convened her officers in the command center. "The Empire will strike soon," she said calmly. "They have resources, but they lack our preparation and our determination. We will not attack first. We will not act recklessly. Every move we make will be calculated, every action deliberate. Our strength lies not in fear, but in discipline, foresight, and unity." Her words inspired confidence. Her team knew that courage alone was not enough. It was patience, preparation, and precision that would ensure survival. The Imperial fleet arrived at the edge of the system. Massive warships loomed against the blackness of space, weapon systems glowing faintly with lethal energy. Communications were attempted, warnings were issued, and threats broadcast, but Vale did not respond with fear. She had anticipated this escalation, and her strategy was already in motion. Cloaked reconnaissance drones observed the fleet, relaying every movement to the command center. The stage was set for the final confrontation. Vale's plan relied not on brute force but on cunning, precision, and the manipulation of perception. The fleet could see the colony's defenses, but they could not see the traps, the ambushes, and the strategic advantages Vale had prepared. The planet's surface was a labyrinth of sensor networks, automated turrets, and carefully concealed bunkers. Every approach had been calculated to funnel the enemy into zones where they would be vulnerable. Vale's advantage was not numbers or firepower. It was intelligence, anticipation, and control. As the first Imperial ships entered the system, Vale coordinated her forces with meticulous precision. Small fighter squadrons emerged from concealed hangars, drawing attention while automated turrets targeted critical points. Mines deployed from hidden orbital platforms forced the enemy into predictable patterns. Every movement of the fleet was anticipated, and every action was countered before it could achieve its objective. The Emperor's forces, though powerful, were unprepared for the depth of human strategy. The first battle was intense but calculated. Vale's forces struck with speed, precision, and intelligence. Fighters darted through the gaps in the fleet's formation, drawing attention and creating openings. Automated systems struck with pinpoint accuracy, disabling ships without causing unnecessary collateral damage. Vale's mind moved faster than the battlefield could change, adapting to the enemy's attempts to regroup and counterattack. Her soldiers followed her guidance without hesitation, executing complex maneuvers with calm efficiency. For the Emperor's fleet, confusion grew. Ships that had expected straightforward victories found themselves ensnared in calculated traps. Every escape route was blocked, every maneuver countered, and every attempt to attack Vale's command center was anticipated. The humans were not merely defending, they were controlling the battlefield. Vale had turned the Empire's own tactics against them, demonstrating that intelligence and preparation could overcome overwhelming force. Despite the chaos, Vale maintained calm. She monitored every system, every sensor, and every squadron. Her presence, though unseen, guided her forces with unmatched precision. Decisions were made instantly, but with careful calculation. Her soldiers trusted her completely, understanding that their survival depended on both her skill and their own discipline. Every moment was a test of nerves, coordination, and intelligence, and Vale passed it flawlessly. The Emperor, observing the unfolding events, realized that his power alone was insufficient. The humans had turned his fleet into a predictable pattern, exploiting weaknesses he had not anticipated. His pride was challenged, his strategy undermined, and his authority questioned. He had underestimated human ingenuity, and now the consequences were undeniable. The fleet suffered losses not because of firepower, but because of foresight, adaptability, and the unity of purpose demonstrated by Vale and her team. Vale's strategy extended beyond the battlefield. She sent messages to nearby human colonies, coordinating reinforcements and securing supply routes. Civilians were evacuated where necessary, and intelligence networks relayed critical information about enemy movements. Every aspect of the conflict was managed with a level of precision that turned the tide not through force alone, but through control, awareness, and preparation. Her ability to think several steps ahead made the difference between survival and destruction. As the battle continued, the Empire's fleet began to fracture. Miscommunication, confusion, and miscalculations caused ships to stray from formation, creating vulnerabilities that Vale exploited. Fighter squadrons struck these gaps with speed and precision, disabling critical systems and forcing larger vessels into retreat. The Emperor's forces, though powerful, were unable to recover the cohesion necessary to succeed. Every attempt to regroup was anticipated and countered. Vale's planning had transformed the battlefield into a human advantage. The turning point came when Vale herself coordinated a bold maneuver. Using a combination of hidden orbital platforms and small, fast-moving strike teams, she cut off the fleet's retreat, isolating the largest ships and neutralizing their firepower. The remaining forces, now trapped and disoriented, were forced to surrender or face destruction. Vale's patience, intelligence, and leadership had turned an overwhelming threat into a decisive victory. The humans of Epsilon 9 had not just survived, they had won. In the aftermath, Vale surveyed the battlefield from the command center. The Emperor's fleet, once a symbol of unstoppable power, had been defeated, scattered, or captured. Her soldiers, exhausted but disciplined, carried out repairs, secured prisoners, and ensured the safety of the colony. Vale moved among them quietly, offering guidance, reassurance, and strategic oversight. There was no celebration, only the calm satisfaction of a plan executed flawlessly. The news of the victory spread faster than the battle itself. Across human space, colonies celebrated not only the survival of Epsilon 9, but the defeat of the Emperor's fleet. Soldiers, traders, and civilians alike marveled at the brilliance, courage, and discipline that had made such a triumph possible. Vale's name became legendary, a symbol of human resilience, intelligence, and determination. She had not only defended a colony, but reshaped the perception of human capability in the galaxy. The Emperor, facing the undeniable truth of his failure, was forced to reassess his approach. He could not act openly without risking further losses, and the humans had demonstrated that brute force alone was insufficient. Vale had proven that intelligence, preparation, and courage could defeat even the most formidable adversaries. The Emperor's authority, though vast, had been challenged in a way that could not be ignored. Vale understood that the war was not truly over. The Empire would adapt, regroup, and attempt new strategies. Yet she also knew that this victory had lasting consequences. Human colonies were inspired, soldiers were disciplined and confident, and the galaxy had witnessed the power of careful planning and strategic brilliance. Vale's actions had created a legacy of courage, intelligence, and unwavering determination that would endure far beyond this battle. As the colony settled into a cautious calm, Vale addressed her officers. Her words were calm, deliberate, and filled with quiet authority. "We have survived, we have prevailed, and we have shown that preparation, discipline, and courage are stronger than fear. But our duty is ongoing. We protect our people, we defend our principles, and we remain vigilant. Today we have won. But tomorrow will demand the same dedication, the same intelligence, and the same courage. Never forget that." Her team nodded, understanding the weight of her message. They had followed her through the danger, witnessed the brilliance of her strategy, and participated in a victory that would be remembered across the galaxy. They knew that under Vale's leadership, humans could face even the most powerful adversaries and emerge victorious. Outside, the twin moons reflected sunlight across the jagged landscape of EP.